with Health by Ratio. We are an online group of licensed physical therapists, functional movement coaches, and corrective exercise specialists that work 100% online with our clients to getting them moving back to full range of stable motion so they can rehab away from chronic pains and injuries and get themselves progressing into their functional health goals and all the activities that they love to do. So we work in a number of different modalities to help with people's mobility, with strengthening, with running gait analysis, exercise cues, like all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that we work with so much with our clients on, especially on the mobility side, is hamstring tightness. Oh my gosh, do we have some crazy hamstring tightness? And so that's what our main topic is for our live today, is all about how to free up these hamstrings, because so many of us have these things being a problem child, and we always think, how do I stretch them more? No matter how much I stretch this thing, this is as tight as all get out. Many of our clients came to us for this reason. Like some of our younger high school clients that are athletes, like Isabella, chronic back pain, and always feeling like, my hamstrings are so tight. I don't understand like how I can loosen these things up. It's affecting my back. One of our other clients, Mackenzie, dealing with an actual hamstring pull, a chronic thing that was aggravating her over and over again. Some of our older clients, like Brian, dealing with chronic back pain and also super tight hamstrings, or Maura, a runner dealing with hamstring aggravation constantly, just a nagging high hamstring strain that couldn't go away kind of thing. Like these are things that are so prevalent for those of us obviously dealing with hamstring injuries. That's kind of a no-brainer, but also like back issues and even knee problems and all the way up to the T-spine and the shoulder girdle. So what the heck is going on when it comes to our hamstrings, and why are they so tight on us? Well, there's a couple of reasons, as my dog likes to stretch into the camera. There are a couple of reasons why our hamstrings get so tight. Reason one is because of how we sit. And it gets impacted actually in a couple of different ways. When we sit, many of us sit kind of lean back into our chair, and we're not sitting on top of our sit bones like this. We're sitting in kind of a lazier position. And when I'm like this and my butt's out in front of me, or if I'm shifting to one side, or I cross a leg, or all this kind of stuff, what's happening is I'm not sitting my weight into the sits bones, my hip bones themselves. What I'm doing is I'm kind of pushing more pressure into the actual high hamstring itself. So I'm kind of like taking my hamstring, I'm compressing it with the chair, and then I'm pushing into this thing. So I'm matting down all this tissue. And it does it while I sit here for hours on end. Even if I get up and move and get back into this position, I am restricting blood flow to the area. I'm not getting it very hydrated. So it gets gunked up and matted down and sticky, and it gets tight in this position. Also, when my knees are bent like this, my hamstring is short the whole time. So this thing gets short and tight. Then at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum is we got these things called our hip flexors and the psoas in particular. And these things get also really tight in the seated position because my hip flexor sits right here. So me folded forward, this thing is getting tight. And where the psoas connects in our body is it connects from the femur itself, the top of your thigh bone, and it runs through and it attaches to the lower back. So it runs through and actually all the way up to your thoracic spine. But it runs through this whole body and attaches from front to back here. So we shorten and tighten it up while we're sitting, and then we get up and we want to be active, and we do things like play sports, or we run, or we bike, or we do all these things that involve us driving our knees. And now we have not only a tight muscle, but an overactive and dominant muscle. And when I'm talking about our hip flexors is because when this thing is tight and over dominant, what it does is it starts pulling on its two connection points. And what we'll see more often than not is it pulls our own torso through basically it pulls our hips through our own torso, and we get put into this thing called an anterior pelvic tilt. Some of us have this just when we're standing. Some of us will be neutral until we take a step, and then this hip flexor gets challenged, and that's when we see the pelvis drop and this arch. So sometimes it's just stationary in our posture. Sometimes it's more in movement, but either way, when the pelvis rotates forward this way, what just happened to my hamstring? My hamstring, which connects right around my butt and right below my knee, my hips are neutral, this thing has a certain amount of tension to it. It's stretched from the bottom of the knee to my butt. Let's call it 20 inches, just to make a random number and say that was the length to keep it easy. But when my hips roll forward this way, whether when I'm standing here or as I'm stepping and my hips roll forward here, and my pelvis drops, my butt just shot up into the air. My hamstring just got pulled an extra inch taut, or an extra 2 inches taut. So now it's not 20 inches, it's 21 inches. It's now a lot tighter. And that's not necessarily because the hamstring all of a sudden tightened up this way, the way we think it's like short and tight. No, it got tighter because it was pulled taut from the get-go. So for instance, if I'm standing neutral right here, my hips are level, and I try to kick my leg straight up, I can get my leg to 90 degrees pretty easily. And then the hamstring says, I'm out of room, and I go back down. But let's say if I had that anterior pelvic tilt, I had really tight hip flexors, and I was rolling forward a little bit. Now I try to do that. Can't get much past halfway now. It doesn't have the range of motion anymore, and it's way more intense there. So that is the reason why, like, this hip flexor often pulls on our pelvis and yanks this hamstring taut, so it doesn't even have the range of motion it should. And then when you combine the fact that we're sitting in these positions that mat down the hamstring, especially the high hamstring area, and get this thing very gunky and compressed without not having very good hydration, well, now we have the recipe for disaster on why this hamstring becomes such a problem child and why it's chronically tight. So how do we fix it? How were we able to get our clients like Isabella and Mackenzie and Maura and Ryan to calm down their hamstrings and get their range of motion back, but then also more importantly, allow the hamstring to heal, allow the lower back to get into its proper engagement and support itself? Well, there's a number of things that we can do, and obviously it's not just around the hips itself. There's things that are happening in the ankles, there's things that are happening up at the T-spine, all of which make a difference to how our body moves. But in terms of the hip complex itself and some things that you can do for some quick wins and getting your body feeling a little bit better, maybe not addressing all the imbalances, but some stuff localized around the hamstrings, this is some easy protocols that we recommend. So we can get into, first and foremost, some trigger point work, meaning we can foam roll or trigger point this gunk out of our hamstrings and our hip flexors for that matter. So how we can do this is we want to grab a seat on a firm chair. We can have our foam roller out or a trigger point ball out. I prefer the trigger point balls in this case. Right now I'm using a peanut, which is like two lacrosse balls molded together, but you could use a single ball, doesn't matter. But you grab a seat kind of on that flat, firm surface, and you're gonna take that ball, stick it right underneath that hamstring, and sit on it. And so we're trying to find that hurts so good knot. So I'm gonna kind of explore from the high hamstring underneath the butt to like the middle of my hamstring. And I'm just kind of trying to find where my biggest tension point is. So for me right now, it's right around the middle here. This is where I got my tension point. So I'm going to sit on this, putting most of my weight on this, and I'm going to put my hands right over top so I can push down and get nice and deep into this area. And now I got that hurt so good pain, like if I'm getting a deep tissue massage right now. So I'm breathing into this, relaxing into it. And then what we try to teach our clients how to do when they're formally and trigger pointing, we don't like doing this and just hanging out here can do some benefits. But also, if you kind of think about it, you might be thinking in your head, well, Madison, if just sitting and like putting a bunch of pressure on my hamstrings is what's matting them down, why would I do that with just a trigger point ball and just push into it? Or why would I sit on a foam roller and do the same thing? Isn't that kind of the same concept of just matting down the tissue? Well, to a certain extent, you're correct. Now, because these tools are a little more acute, it's much different than just sitting on a chair. So you are breaking apart some of that gunk, and when you break it apart, you get some blood flow. But you can actually incorporate your contractions and relaxations and some movements in here to make it so that this thing is extending and contracting and get some blood flow and pliability to it. So as I'm doing this, what we encourage our clients to do is a proprioceptive contraction where we take a really deep breath in through the diaphragm. So deep belly breath. Then we hold that for 5 seconds. So we have the whole system flooded with oxygen. And while we do that, we're going to tense up whatever area we're trying to release. So in this case, it's my hamstring. So I'm going to just kind of push my toes down and back into the ground. And that in and of itself tightens up my hamstring. While I'm tightening this thing up, I want to ease up off of the trigger point ball just a little bit. So it shouldn't be so intense. So I push down into the floor, get a little bit of tightness, ease up off of it, shouldn't be as painful. Hold that for 5 seconds, and then I'm going to exhale, relax the leg, push deeper onto this, and try to see as I take that nice long exhale breath, if I can get this thing to relax a little bit. Now, I'm going to go through that sequence a number of times, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times kind of thing, back and forth. It'll take me probably about 15 to 20 seconds to do that full, like, deep breath in, hold, and then relax and exhale kind of thing. And then at some point, this tension is going to diminish. It's going to go from that hurts so good 7 out of 10 pain to like a 3 out of 10. It'll be like a dull ache. It'll be much less intense. That's what we're looking for. And once we get to that point, we can incorporate a little bit of movement by extending the leg straight and back, doing a little bit of rocking with it. I can move the foot a little bit inside or outside and see if that changes the angle on it. But I'm just creating some movement and extra blood flow to the areas, and I release it. And then if there wasn't any more gunk that I needed to work on there, cool, moving on to the next side. And I can do this with, like I said, trigger point ball is my preference, but if you have your foam roller, that can work too. Same concept. You're just going to sit all of your weight on that foam roller, and I would recommend doing it just on one leg at a time. If you distribute your weight between the two legs, then often that's the foam roller isn't acute enough to get the pressure needed to really work into that area. Now, that's the first thing. We just mobilize our hamstrings a little bit. Now, the next thing that I would often have our clients do, and almost every one of our clients do, is trigger point their actual hip flexor, release that. I've gone over that on other videos, and I'm sure I will go over that on future videos, but I'm going to get more into the stretches right now and skip over the trigger pointing of the actual hip flexor psoas kind of region. But the stretch side of it, I'm going to show just 2 stretches. I'm going to do my hip flexor stretch really quick to create a little bit of slack in that so as to help my hamstring be able to pull my pelvis down a little bit. Then I'm going to do a quick hip tuck exercise, and then I'm going to go into an actual hamstring stretch. And now you can do these just body weight. I have a couple of resistance bands next to me. These are called super bands. We use these in our program with our clients a lot, but you can use regular resistance bands with it. And these are a little bit heavier duty, and they're going to help pull my hip capsule open in some ways. So the first one is a hip flexor stretch. Like I said, when the hip flexor is tight, it pulls us through our torso, and it yanks us in a way that creates way more tension to that hamstring. So if I really want to release this hamstring, I better release my hip flexor as well. So I'm going to get into a position where, again, you can do this body weight, but if you have access to a super band or a heavy duty band, or maybe you have to loop a couple of bands around this, you want to anchor them low. So I have this connected to the bottom of my door frame here with a door anchor. As long as it's knee height or below, you're good. So just be connecting it to a door anchor or wrapping it around a post or something like that, and you're ready to rock. So I got my knee down. I have this band wrapped around my very high hamstring right below my butt. I'm thinking about squeezing my glute here and then just slowly bringing my hips toward this door. And this big band right now is pulling me forward, and it's opening up this whole front of my hip capsule right here. That's why I have it wrapped around the back of my leg. And now to get a little deeper into this stretch, after I've held this for about 20 to 30 seconds, I'm going to take a deep breath in. And on the exhale, I'm going to swing my arm straight up into the air. And that's going to increase this stretch just a little bit more. Then I'm going to take another deep breath in. And on the exhale, I'm going to slightly rotate my torso over the front knee. So in this case, I'm rotating to my left. That increases my stretch even more so. I'm going to hold that for about 10 to 15 seconds, drop out of it, and then I'm going to go to the other leg and do the same thing. So now I've gotten this band to open up this hip capsule, relax my psoas a little bit, have a little bit more slack in the chain. Now what I want to do is some hip tucks. Now, if you're familiar with hip tucks, you can do this just standing, where you are focusing on letting your pelvis, like I like to actually have my hands along my belt line here. So here I'm neutral. I'm going to consciously let my pelvis dip forward. So I'm going to let my hips roll forward and arch my back. That's what pulled my hamstrings taut, right? Now, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to try to pull my tailbone down between my legs and squeeze the heck out of my butt as I do so. So I go from my hands slope forward to my glutes squeezing and my hands get back to level, and then letting my hip slope forward and then back to level. Now, the big thing we want to do, and we have to work with our clients quite a bit on this, is that often at first, when we do this pelvic tuck, it's very easy in the standing position to get the motion not from the pelvis itself, but from the knee bending. So my pelvis is still kind of staying in the same position, but I'm just bending my knees to do it. I got to keep the knees straight and get the movement all from the pelvis the whole time. So if that's challenging for you, go into a kneeling position where you just have both of your knees on the ground, same thing, and go in and out of it from here. And then you don't even have the option to bend the knees. So you can kind of take that out of the equation. But either way, I'm trying to squeeze the heck out of those glutes, pull my hips back down to level, and trying to create that slack down into my hamstring a little bit more. And now comes the actual hamstring stretch. So again, you can do this just laying down on the ground, and you can grab like I'm using one of my resistance bands. You can grab a stretch strap or a towel or something like that. But if you have access to your big band, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to wrap it around the top of my thigh, right up to the very, very edge of my hip flexor right here. So I got it right into the corner of that hip press. And I'm going to scoot back a little bit so I got some good tension pulling me straight down. And then, and again, this is my whole leg is wrapped through this. Then I'm going to take my stretch strap, wrap it around my foot, and I'm going to come up into a hamstring stretch with this other band pulling my hip capsule straight down here. This is an amazing hamstring stretch because as this band is pulling me down, my femur is literally getting pulled a little bit out of my hip socket. It's creating some really good space into there. So for like some of our clients like Maura, this is one of my favorites for her because this stretch opens up not just the hamstring, but it also pulls open the hip capsule. So if there's any like sciatic nerve compressions or something like that, we create more space to this area by opening up the hip a little bit so the nerves aren't getting as compressed. So we're killing multiple birds with one stone while we're doing this. And then as I'm here, I can go in and out of some gentle knee bends just to get a little bit of movement into the hamstring. And I can go into some toe points and toe pulls. And now I'm going to feel a deeper calf stretch as I go in and out of this because the hamstrings and the calves are also connected here. So we can get all the above as I'm hanging out, getting this hip traction and inverting this leg. It's a really good stretch that's super effective right after you've released the hip flexors and engaged the glutes a little bit in those hip tucks. And now, as I stand up, obviously I've only done this to my right leg, this hip feels so much more open and loose, and now I got to do this to my left leg or else I'm going to be walking around crooked all day. But these are some easy techniques that you can do on your own to create a little bit more slack to those hamstrings. Goes a really long way in freeing up the tension in around the hips, freeing up tension in around the lower back, and how we've helped a number of our clients overcome some of these challenges themselves. So if you're interested in some deeper dives into what's going on with your body, maybe if you're like, hey, this is great for the hamstrings, but I got some other stuff going on with my back, right? Like, I don't know what's going on with my shoulder. I feel like my knees and my feet are impacted as well. Whatever, if that's the case, if you got some other things that you're dealing with, we'd be more than happy to help. That's why we offer our free video assessment calls. We do a couple of consultation calls with everyone that comes to us. So we do an initial intake consultation call, just it's about 20, 30 minutes to figure out where you're coming from and what your goals are and what your body's been through. And then we follow that up with a video analysis where we connect over a free video assessment to see how your body's moving from head to toe and test it out its ranges of motion and really see how it's connected and where the impacts are coming from. And then we can use that to create a holistic game plan on correcting your entire body, as opposed to just kind of cherry picking certain areas and trying to treat one injury at a time or one pain at a time. We're going to create balance to the whole body at the same time. So we'll attach a link to our calendar if you'd like to schedule up one of those consultation calls. Or if you have any questions for us or some ideas for other topics that you want us to cover, feel free to either comment below the video or feel free to send us a direct message or an email, whatever, all the above, and just let us know what you'd like us to cover. We're always looking for suggestions and we'd be happy to help. So hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.